Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden. I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle, and I've seen almost nothing.
I'm Nella, and hold fast, because we're watching Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World.
That's right. It's another movie night, and we have our guest Nella and Sarah, and it is one more thing as well. I'm not exactly sure where this is going to fall in the Terror Season 1 season, but this is our 100th episode.
Woo! Yay!
We did it. We've come so far from me being like, hey, Danielle, do you want to like react to nonsense on a podcast in public?
And I said yes. Wait, let me clarify. I said, do I have to do any research? Joy said no, and then I said yes.
Correct. And now you know the secret of why we have guests who do research. But yes, just before we fully get going here, I just wanted to say a quick shout out to our listeners. Thank you so much for listening. We do it for you. You know, it's been really cool. It's been super great with the folks interacting with us on Twitter and following us. And I think by the time this comes out, we may break 10,000 downloads.
Whoa.
Don't quote me on that, but that's super cool. And we couldn't do it without listeners like you. And now I'm done. But yes, so we watched Master and Commander. And I had seen it, Far Side of the World. I had seen it before when it came out, so I saw it in theaters. I knew almost nothing about it, and I feel like I promptly forgot this movie after I saw it. I don't know why. It didn't stick in my brain. And
no, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I had a very similar experience where, for whatever reason, it just completely fell off my radar. It wasn't something that I was fully aware happened. And I know that there was one time someone tried to make me watch it, but I was so tired that I literally fell asleep in the beginning, like before anyone even starts talking, because there's a lot of time, many minutes.
You know, thinking about it, this came out before I knew you at NYU, so like
that would make sense. Yeah,
I didn't get my claws in you. I had another Newman Club friend to be like, Master Commander is the greatest movie ever with, and you weren't there yet, so.
Listen, so little did I know about this movie that when I rented it in order to watch it for this podcast, I went to click on like the little rent button, saw that the title was Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, and thought, oh shoot, was there a second one?
Well, we will get to that.
No, we'll get to that.
But yeah, just a quick, Nella's going to take care of the summary, but for those of you unfamiliar with Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, I think that's going to be the running thing where we just say the full title, because damn it deserves it.
You have to now.
It deserves it. Came out in, I believe, 2003, so happy birthday to this movie, 20 years old. Good job.
Yeah.
And stars
one more year and it can legally drink.
Yes. Just holding out hope. Well, actually, probably in Europe, it can probably already legally drink, so it's probably already drunk. And also, those
little kids on the ship are like 9 years old and drinking.
I was just gonna say, as this movie proves, if you were in the Navy at that time, then that's it. You had a drink, no matter how old you were. It stars Russell Crowe as Captain Jack Aubrey, Paul Bettany as Dr. Stephen Maturin. Maturin. Wow. See? What a brain I've got. I love that
that's why I'm here.
In the top cast, the third one down is Billy Boyd. So this is how you know it's fresh off that good Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it sure was.
And there's I could go on and on about this cast. There's a bunch of folks who you see them, you love them, you know who they are. Really good character actors, really good British actors. It's littered with stars. Would you like to tell us what this is about, Nella?
Sure.
Are you still adding to your summary? We can vamp and.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, recap time. I know this movie. I can concisely give you the synopsis.
There is a paragraph on
Of course I can.
IMDb if you want me to read that.
Shh, no. I can do this.
Okay.
All right. So Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World is a 2003 American epic period war drama. It is based on Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maughton series, which is a 20-book series.
Whoa.
That I believe the first one was published in 1969. It stars Captain Jack Aubrey of the HMS Surprise, who is ordered to intercept the heavy frigate the Acheron, a French privateer. The Acheron ambushes the Surprise, however, off the coast of Brazil, causing heavy damage, but luckily the Surprise escapes into a fog bank. While it's recovering from its wounds, Aubrey's officers tell him that the Surprise is no match for the Acheron. They should abandon the chase. Aubrey, however, is a very jolly madman who is just like, we can take her. and he follows chase because he believes the Acheron should not be allowed to plunder the British whaling fleet in the Pacific. So they take chase. They follow the privateer south, and in a very dramatic rounding of Cape Horn ensues. They head towards the Galapagos, where he's convinced the Acheron will that's going to be their hunting grounds, because like that's a watering hole for a lot of the whaling fleet. His best buddy and the ship's surgeon, Stephen Maltrin, is very excited about the Galapagos because he's a naturalist, as well as, we don't really know this in the movie, but just so you know, Stephen Maltrin is a spy for the king and country.
I love that.
Even though he's Irish Catalan, and it's just like, why would you even? But better than Boney, I guess. Anyway, so however, he doesn't get to spend any time on Galapagos because, oh no, survivors of an attack from the Acheron come around the corner. It's a bunch of whalers. So Aubrey hastily pursues the privateer, much to Mautrin's absolute disapproval and disappointment.
So disappointed.
However, bad luck follows the Surprise as superstition takes hold of the crew. It leads to the suicide of one of the midshipmen. Additionally, Mautrin is shot, which forces Aubrey to choose his friend over the pursuit of the French privateer. Naturalism saves the day, inspiring Aubrey to lay a trap for the privateer, which leads to its capture. That's it. That's my synopsis.
It's perfect. I love it. That was such a good synopsis.
Yeah.
Okay,
Solid.
so speaking of synopses, Joy and I talked about how we were introduced, I suppose, to this movie. How did that journey play out for you? Like,
I feel like you were very different than the two of us.
Yes. I'm gonna say probably.
Well, you see, the year was 2000. I was a sophomore.
I was a wee
in
Nella.
high school. And I had tried to read Lord of the Rings in middle school, and it just didn't stick. And I had a friend a year younger than me who was like, what do you mean you've never read Lord of the Rings? But the movies are coming out next year. You have to read it. So for that Christmas, she gave me the full Lord of the Rings, which I still have. And it was my solemn duty to read it. In the year I did read it, I really fell in love with it. So the next Christmas, after our last final of the year in high school, we all roll into my dad's, SUV. I think there were 7 of us, and we all go to a 4 p.m. showing of Fellowship of the Rings.
Awesome.
And that was the beginning of the end for me, because the thing you have to understand about the Lord of the Rings fandom was that we went hard. We went so hard. Oh my God. And one of the cardinal rules of the Lord of the Rings fandom was that if a Lord of the Rings person was in a movie, you went to go see it. It didn't matter. Especially if they were your boy, and Billy Boyd or Pippin was my boy. I mean, I got to interview him at Icon for my school newspaper. It was definitely anything Billy Boyd's in, I'll see it. Hands down.
Wait, I have to interject just a little bit because I feel like this is where our stories intersect. Now, Nella and I didn't actually meet until 2009, but I actually had a friend in high school as well who Billy Boyd was also her boy. And we went to see everything Billy Boyd was in because hashtag Lord of the Rings. And if you were a fan of Pippin, you saw a bunch of really weird nonsense because Billy Boyd did a bunch of very strange films.
Yes,
so
and we love him
is
for
that
it.
why you saw this in theaters, Joy?
I have to think it must have been. I will reach out to my friend and confirm before this episode comes out. But like, it must have been that because not that I have anything against this film, but it just doesn't, it didn't exactly grab me. I'm not a huge ship person. I'm not a huge Navy person. At the time, I definitely wasn't any kind of historical film anything person unless it was about a creative type. Yeah, this didn't, like, I'm not a huge war buff.
No, I get that. For me, it was the fact that I knew that this was, like, my understanding of this movie was that this was a war movie. And that's why I almost immediately was like, meh, don't care. But
yes, but that's probably...
I mean, it is a war movie.
It is a war movie, for sure.
I mean, it literally says in giant capital letters on the very first screen, or in the very first shot, oceans are now battlefields. So, yes, like, it is a war movie. But I'm glad that you have... Forced is the wrong verb to use, but I cannot think of a better one.
Suggested.
I'm glad that I've been...
You've been obliged. You've been obliged.
I'm glad that you all sat me down and you were like, we are going to record an episode about this movie, and so you are going to watch it. Because I actually ended up really, really enjoying it. I didn't know that I would.
Yes.
Because... Anyway, we interrupted your story. Billy Boyd.
No. So Billy Boyd. Now, congruent to the Billy Boyd phenomenon, I also went to a high school that my freshman year, and they had been supposedly doing this for a couple of years, but they would have like a team building exercise for each class, and they would hire a tall sailing ship called the Rose and take us out into Long Island Sound for the day, and we'd have to do ship things.
I don't know, man.
And I loved
Long
it.
Island is weird.
I was like, is this a Long Island thing, or
it's a very North Shore Long Island. I'm sure I don't know what the South Shore does, but this made sense to me at the time. I was also on my team sailing team, so my school's sailing team. So I had a grand old time. It was the wettest I've ever been because there was no wind and a storm rolled over and it was literally coming down. I've never seen straighter rain in my life. My raincoat pockets were filled with water. That's how vertical the rain was. Amazing. Anyway, I also discovered on that trip that there's no way you're ever getting me up the riggings. Ever. I maybe got 3 rungs up, looked down, and was like, that's high enough for that. And then I went back down. But anyway, so congruent to the Billy Boyd obsession, by the time I hit sophomore year and junior year, they were no longer doing the Rose team building thing because the ship had been commissioned for a movie. And my high school brain was like, oh, what's the movie? And it took me a while to find out what movie they were filming it with, and it turns out it was a little movie called Master and Commander: Far Side of the World. So yes, I have been on HMS Surprise.
That's ridiculous.
Which is so cool.
It was just called the Rose at the time.
So cool.
But anyway, so
when you first started telling that story, I was not imagining that you were on like a full-size ship.
Oh
like
no,
this,
she was an actual legitimate sailing, and it was a recreation, of a historic ship called the Rose. And then they refigured it to, more be in line with what the HMS Surprise would have been like. But still, like, I was on her. So now I have two things in my court that is saying, Nella, you should look into this. So I find out the name of the movie. Billy Boyd's going to be in it. And I'm like, well, now I have to read the books because I have to know what all this nonsense is about. Mm-hmm. My school library had maybe like 3 or 4 of the Patrick O'Brian books. And I think they were the first 3 and maybe one that was like the 6th or 7th book. That I don't really remember. Now, the thing about the Patrick O'Brian books is that they are 100% written in the verbiage of 19th century kind of language. Like, it can be dense if you're, because not only is the language very appropriate for the era, but he did deep dive like research into the jargon of the sailing culture at the time. So that's why we have Stephen Mawtrin as a character, because he's the landlubber who's just like, what is that thing again? And everyone has to explain it to him, you know? So that's why we have Stephen. But anyway, so I get my hands on, you know, the first couple of books, and I love them because, like I said, I was on my school's sailing team, so I knew just enough sailing terminology to understand what they were talking about. For it to make sense, and to pick it up. So that definitely helped. And it was just like, look, I was a big Sherlock Holmes girly, so yeah, two kind of like not, like two guys that are fundamentally different, but they're best buds forever, and they get into all sorts of hijinks. Of course, I love that.
Yes, that's like, give me, please.
Oh, and the third thing being, also in high school, I was obsessed with the movie Gladiator. So I was just like, so you're telling me this movie has Billy Boyd in it, it has Russell Crowe in it, it has like a ship I was on. Oh, and another thing is, I was also obsessed with A Knight's Tale. So you're telling me Chaucer is in it as well? Sign me up. I'm here. I'm like, this movie was made for me. So I see the movie, and yes, it's true. The movie was made for me. Like, and you know, by that point, I was like going off to college, and so I get to college, and my university library has more of the books, so I'm reading more of the books, and like truly getting into the. I must have listened to that soundtrack ad nauseum. I bought the DVD. It was like one of the few physical DVDs I actually owned because I loved it so much. Like, and like LiveJournal was kind of at its. LiveJournal was like a beautiful place that nothing hurt, and
I feel like that was
I definitely was part of the fandom.
Peak LiveJournal.
Yeah, I would say, like, for me, peak LiveJournal was, like, 2006, 2007. But, yeah, it was, like, I had just gotten a LiveJournal because it was my first year of college. So, like, being able to jump right into LiveJournal and be like, what are people doing in the Patrick O'Brien fandom? And having a bunch of people be like, have you read any Slash yet?
So the fandom was pretty lively.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other thing was, I mean, it definitely seemed like a very passionate fandom. I couldn't tell you numbers. I know we had, like, some big-name fans. And, in fact, actually, I recommended the Temeraire series to you.
Yes.
And, yeah. Well, that series was written by a Patrick O'Brien big-name fan.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that.
And one of the, like, for all of us in the fandom, like, the selling point was, like, guys, we all know how well they write, like, Mawtrin and Aubrey, and this book is Aubrey and Mawtrin, but there's a dragon. But one of them's a dragon. Like, roll, let's go, this is it. Yeah, we were all very, very excited. And like it is, I really do love that series. I love the alternate history of the series, but that's a side point. But yeah, so like it was just a really, at the time it was a very welcoming, very awesome place. There was a lot of good fic to read that was very long and very well researched and very much in the tone of the original books, while also like a lot of cheeky nods to the movies. You know, there was a lot of very clever LiveJournal icons. We all would just laugh madly about the debauched sloth. There's this one scene in one of the books where, you know, Mawtrin, because he's a naturalist, he gets his hands on a sloth, and he brings the sloth on board, and Aubrey, for just because it's there, sitting next to him, kind of looking at him, he starts giving it alcohol. Oh no! and then the sloth is just kind of drunk, and it's the famous line that Mawtrin looks at the sloth and goes, "Aubrey, have you debauched my sloth?"
I would had I been amongst the fandom, had I been in the live journals and the forums, my screen name 1000% would have been debauched sloth.
I mean, get in line.
Debauched sloth 0812 or whatever. For sure. Yeah,
no, so it was a series that was very dear to my heart. And I still look back on it very fondly. You know, I once LiveJournal sort of collapsed, I didn't really, and by that point the fandom had gotten quiet, at least on the end I participated in. So went off to new and shinier things. I mean, Star Trek happened, and then suddenly I was the captain of a Star Trek meetup group. I
mean, I'm always kind of sad that this didn't get more movies, because obviously it's built for that, right? It has all the books. Yeah. It obviously had something of a following. I think it's such a pity. Did it just not do well in theaters?
Well, for the year, supposedly it came in number 33.
Wait, wasn't
in
it
top
like
grossing.
Oscar winning or something? Did
It was so here's what it was up against though.
Okay.
Because it was nominated for a lot of stuff. But
Okay.
it was the year that Return of the King was also up. And
Oh,
you have
well,
to
that's
remember
just not fair.
the Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
movie hadn't gotten bupkis.
No, I remember.
And that was the year.
Like the third one. Yep.
Yeah, that was the year they were like, well, now that they're all done, I guess
Yes.
we'll just give them all the
All the
awards
things.
now.
Yeah.
So if you were any movie in the same year, you were just shit out of luck. And it was, I mean, it was nominated for various ones, but I don't have the list in front of me. But in regards to the money it brought in, I mean, it ended up 33rd and highest grossing film in 2003. And I think it was like behind like Legally Blonde 2. And no shade to Legally Blonde 2, but I feel like in 2003, nobody knew what to do with it.
Oh, no, they didn't market it well at all.
Yeah, it wasn't marketed well. And also, it's a weird thing of like, I feel like it was a little too nice for a post 9/11 world, if that makes sense. Like, it was just a little too cozy. I have no other way to describe it for a war movie.
1000% agree with you, because one of the things that was most surprising to me about this film were how few people died. Like, how few members... Like, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop on poor Steven. You know, I was like, okay, so he survived, like, the bullet wound to his side. He's going to try to catch a Komodo dragon and die, right? Like, something's going to happen to this man, and then just nothing did.
We did this.
And, I mean,
we did this to you, Danielle. We made you watch The Terror before watching this film, and that's it.
But, like, So there was an article written in GQ magazine in March 2023, and it's titled, "Why Are So Many Guys Obsessed with Master and Commander?" Now, here's the thing. In the article, the writer goes like, gender-neutral guys. I mean gender-neutral guys. But I'm also just like, okay, I see what you're doing. But, you know, very much talking about, like, why do so many, like, in the 20 years since this was released, why does it seem like everyone's watching it again? And there's this almost like, it's almost like cozy catastrophe, or like a cottage catastrophe kind of thing, where it's like bad things are happening, but it feels cozy as they're happening. And the world seems really ordered. And then you have, and you know, the article goes in about, you know, there's so much screen time devoted to close conversations between Aubrey and Maturin in their two dude violin and cello jam sessions. And the quote is, "You come away with a sense of satisfaction at their accomplishments and camaraderie, and just a bit of longing over a bygone way of life." So I think that's a really good point. And I think that's just not something in 2003 audiences were marketed for, or that audiences were looking for at all in movies.
And I mean, I have you know, I mean, I know I said I watched this movie and then I instantly forgot everything about it. And I don't know if it just didn't stay in my brain because I was not a fan of Gladiator. I went to see Gladiator and I was like, oh, that's a movie. Why is everyone losing their minds? It just didn't. I don't know. I missed the Gladiator train. I don't know what else to tell you. Not that I think Russell Crowe is a terrible actor or anything like that. I actually think he probably surprises himself with how good he actually is. I also, like, unfortunately didn't even know who Paul Bettany was, which is such a shame because what an amazing actor he is. And, you know, folks will probably think of him now as Vision.
Yeah.
But it, like, again, like, that was like, it was kismet for me because like, you know, my friend Wyatt, like, we had read Chaucer's Tales in sophomore year, and that summer A Knight's Tale came out, and he's like, Chaucer's a character in this movie, we have to go see it. So when I tell you my first introduction to Paul Bettany was him completely bare-ass nude walking down a road,
I mean,
as
that
Chaucer.
was also my introduction to him, and I was deeply obsessed with A Knight's Tale. Speaking of soundtracks I've listened to over and over again.
Oh, no,
certainly
Danielle,
that's one of them.
we're going to have to watch
So
A Knight's
good,
Tale
so good.
because I don't think I've ever seen it.
Oh my.
Oh!
It was marketed as a romantic comedy, and I was like, okay. Like, never in a million years would I have, like, there was a whole subset of aughts and late 90s films that I was like, and it's a romantic comedy. No, thank you. Because it's going to be awful.
Yeah, they got me because they included Chaucer.
No, that's fine. Again, had I known that, I might have even been slightly interested.
All right. We'll add it to the docket. But regardless, one other point I want to bring up is I distinctly remember some people talking about Master and Commander and being upset that Paul Bettany was cast because they considered him to be too handsome for the role of Stephen Mawtron.
I mean, I've heard that before.
Because Stephen Mawtron is a gremlin. he is described as ugly, as like thin, as he forgets to bathe frequently. Mm-hmm. He is obsessive in his studies and in his work, and really gets along with no one aside from like Jack. And Jack's just like, this is my beautiful friend, Stephen Mawtron. He is the best thing since sliced toast.
I mean, I've heard that complaint before with, book to movie. We have that in several series. Yeah. I mean, even in Good Omens, my favorite, like, little side note about the Good Omens fandom is how everyone sort of accepts that if movie Crowley and Aziraphale and book Crowley and Aziraphale ever actually met each other, how intensely hilarious it would be for the book versions, because they would be like, oh my gosh, you're so attractive. What did they do? Like, and they would be like very pro TV series. Just like, I didn't think they could find anyone this gangly. Look at you.
But yeah.
I love that they thought he was like too attractive for the role. That's so funny.
Yeah. It's always funny to me because Paul Bettany, who is married to Jennifer Connelly, is just like, I don't know why anyone thinks I'm attractive.
I know.
Like, and I don't know how my wife thinks I don't know what happened there. I don't know what to tell you. I
love that about him, though. See, for me, I'm like, I don't know whether I actually find him attractive either. But there's definitely like a vibe to him that's very charming. I think he's a very charming person.
Yeah, it's a real Benedict Cumberbatch problem, where he'll hear things like, "Oh, I'm attractive, am I? Well, I always thought I looked like Sid the Sloth, so I guess if that's your thing." Like,
do you?
Do you? I mean, I guess I'm not going to argue with you, but sure. Okay, I'll take it.
Oh, gosh. Okay, wait. What are we supposed to be talking about right now? We did the recap. Well, actually, I have a random question now that you're mentioning the books and the movie. Like, how many books does this movie cover? Or is it one of the books?
So it's mostly based on the book entitled The Far Side of the World, which is the 10th book in the series.
Oh, 10th.
So I've also seen it described as like 3 books in a trench coat. All right, well, should we get on to like parts we liked and another plot type thing?
Yeah.
Sure. What do we do? Do you want to do plot? Do you want to do characters? I like that we're just deciding this on the spot. It's fantastic.
Let's do like characters and moments.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Who's going to talk about Captain Jack?
Look, I love Captain Jack Aubrey, and like I think there's some elements from the books that translate really well, but I also want to add a little bit of like context about like some of book Jack, which I think is really delightful. So, this is obviously a Jack who is well established in his career at this time, and there's sort of a kind of a comment that Patrick O'Brian made where after the first couple of books, you get a sort of bunch of books that all take place in 1812, where it's like, that's too much stuff to be happening in one year. And so he would call them like, oh, this is year 1812A and this is year 1812B. But so like the Far Side of the World sort of takes place in that time period where Aubrey has been a captain for more than a decade at this point in chronological time, because the first book really takes place in, I think, 1800, somewhere between 1800 and 1802 from the best I can recollect. And it's just before the Peace of Amiens. So, like, he gets his prize ship, and, like, he's in his 20s, somewhere between 20s and 30s, and that's where he meets Stephen Maturin. And then, so this is years after the fact. They're well established in their friendship. But one thing about Jack is that he's always described as being he's a very good captain. Earlier on in the series, he makes a joke about how he's bad at math and, like, things like that, but he has a fantastic working knowledge of, I mean, he's very much what we would call Crozier. He's like a blue water man. He has learned how to captain a ship, and he knows the ship in and out. He knows how to get the most speed out of the sails without breaking the masts. You know, he's a true seaman. And he's very decisive. But he's also very jolly. You know, he's a good captain. He has great authority, and he doesn't abuse that authority. On land, however, he's a hot mess.
Oh, no.
Because this is actually a really fascinating look into, you know, the prize system. You know, as we were watching The Terror, I did mention, you know, and then so and so was on half pay and this and this. During the Napoleonic era, where, you know, you could make your name in the Navy and make money in the Navy by capturing prizes or ships, and getting money from the capture of that. But that also means there's a lot of feast and famine. And Jack has a lot of feast and famine in his money situation, including one scenario where he captures 2 ships, but then later on he finds out that it was during a trial, it was determined that those 2 ships belonged to, like, neutral countries, so that he has to pay back the prizes, which is an astronomical sum that no one could pay, much less Jack Aubrey. Yeah. So then it becomes this whole thing of, like, if he steps foot on land, he will be thrown in a poorhouse. And he has absolutely rum luck with, like, there was someone who was supposed to manage your money when you were off on a ship. I believe a prize, they called him now I don't remember, but like a prize manager pretty much. And he gets a pretty bad one who steals all of his money.
Oh, no.
And runs off to another country. So it's just like this constant, for all of his good luck at sea, he has no luck. And of course this becomes a big plot point when he's trying to marry Sophia, you know, who's this very sensible woman whose mother is just like, I will not let you marry this man until he can prove he's out of debt. Absolutely not. And later on in the series, as he gets older, like, and they have 3 kids, and Sophia becomes the one who's, like, very good at managing their money when he's away. Kind of like she's the one holding it together.
Get you a Sophia.
For sure. Get you a Sophia. But so there is very much that sense of, like, you know, Jack is an amazing captain. He's so good at sea, and on land he is just clueless and annoying. And in fact, that's how him and Stephen meet. He is at, like, a salon where someone's playing music, and he loves the piece of music so much he starts tapping along and sort of bopping along to it. And Stephen they haven't met yet, but Stephen sits next to him, and he's just pretty much hisses at him to don't do that.
Oh, because he's interrupting the performance?
And also you're not technically on time. Like, you are interrupting my enjoyment of the music. Stop. Is pretty much what the scene. And Jack at first is furious at this man. He's almost like, I should call him out for a duel. But then he gets his letter of his captaincy, and he's filled with so much, like, joy and happiness at this. He, like, when he sees Stephen on the street, all thoughts of, like, this swear jar are out of his head. And he's like, sir, I am so sorry for what, like, I was, you know what? I know it was inappropriate of me, but I am so happy right now. I just got my commission. Can I take you to lunch? And Stephen's like, okay.
Sure. This hermit.
And then they become best friends forever.
This hermit doctor, just an introvert. Accosted on the street by this extrovert.
And then, of course, you know, it comes down to, like, Jack being like, hey, buddy, like, oh, you're a physician? Wow, you know, we would love to have a physician on our boat. And then Stephen's like, oh, that sounds like an interesting life choice I can make right now at the drop of a hat. I mean, I'm not connected to anything, and honestly, like, I'm kind of weird and nobody likes me. Are you sure you want me? And he's like, you're a physician. Yes, we want you.
I love how weirdly, like, opposite Sherlock Holmes, but, like, elements of personality of both John Watson and Holmes in both of them. Like,
For sure.
like I just see Stephen as like the Sherlock Holmes, but if he had zero of the hyperness, and it was just very studious.
He just has the hyper.
He has the hyper focus and would really rather not talk to anyone, which, you know, feels a little.
Meanwhile, I would say Jack has the
boisterous,
hyperactivity.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so that's sort of like the backstory of how they two meet, and then we get into this story where they've obviously been friends for a long time. Mm-hmm. You know, they both have their places on board ship. Gosh, there's just so much about this movie I love. I don't know where to really begin. Like, I love how the first battle is introduced. I love how out of nowhere it comes.
Yeah.
Literally out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I love how I really do feel like this is like the first movie that I'd ever seen that really spoke to the terror of ship battle at sea and the long stretches of like just maintenance and drudgery and keeping to your dog watches and whatever, and then spiked by sudden periods of certain death and terror.
I love their friendship, and I love how it's portrayed. And I like, how do I explain my thought? Like whenever you have friends who some are in not positions, I mean, in this movie, yes, it's a position of authority. But like if you have a friend who is obviously on a higher rung than you are, and you both are at the same, like at a job or at a, or in the service, something like that, it is a really like tenuous line to cross of how important the friendship actually is. And I feel like we get both of that, like we get the service comes first, and we also get, we weren't doing anything else. So obviously the friendship's going to come first. We get both of that here.
And we definitely get them wrestling with that, right? Like that scene where Stephen asks Jack, like, are you asking me about a mutiny as my captain or as my friends? Right? Yeah. Or when the captain, or when Jack actually breaks that promise with Stephen and Stephen blows up. He hadn't cracked prior to that, which I'm actually kind of curious, because you had said earlier that Stephen is a spy in the books.
Yes.
So like, I know that they lifted that out of the movie, obviously, probably just because it was too much all at once. But they did
there's not any spying he can do, right?
No.
It's all on the boat. There's not spying he can do in this scene. There's plenty of areas in the book where he is on land. And actually, in one book, there is a very daring rescue of Stephen where Aubrey does the classic, like, I'm only taking volunteers, but it looks like these bad guys have our physician, and we need to go get him. And everyone volunteers for this rescue mission.
I am a little sad we couldn't see some of that in the movie.
Me too.
This is why we needed sequels. Maybe now that things have gained traction, I don't know. In 2001, they started talking about a prequel in pre-production, and I haven't heard anything since.
Boo.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, but the reason I brought that up is that what they do choose to keep in for Stephen is that side of him that's very anti-Authorian and actually sort of hates that he's on this ship and part of this entire system and this hierarchy. And they keep that in as an interesting level, too, of their friendship.
Yeah, and that is, it's so interesting with Stephen Mawtron, because the books absolutely depict him as a man who is very much with feet in multiple worlds. He is, like I said, he is Irish and Catalan. He was, actually his Catalan name, because he was raised a Roman Catholic by his Catalonian family, is Esteban Mawtron e Domanova.
Well, I can see why he dropped that.
But he's the illegitimate son of an Irish officer. And he spent time in Ireland and in Catalonia. And he was in Paris during the French Revolution, which he was an ardent supporter of. He was a member of the United Irishmen. But during the 1798 Irish Rebellion, he's described as becoming disillusioned with political extremism and enthusiasm. Because he just sort of sees the suffering it causes, and in the first book he does have a friend who is very like gun ho, like we have to blah blah blah, go back to war for the Irish, and he's just like, and so more people can die. No, I'm done. So there is a very, there is sort of this element to Stephen where, but you're a spy for the British. Yes, because I don't want Napoleon to rule everything, actually. So,
right.
And I mean, and there's a kind of that sense of like, of that conflict, but, Stephen Maturin is somebody who can live with the conflict, and, other people might give him the side eye, but he's made his kind of peace with it on most occasions.
Well, what he's done is he's chosen the lesser of two evils.
He has chosen the lesser of two weevils. Oh, no. Okay. This is the lesser of two weevils.
Is this where this goes?
I guess, God, this is a mess of an episode, but yeah, so.
Welcome to Binge O'Clock Podcast, Nella.
Right, because again, this movie is so good about weaving the scenes of high drama, high intensity, and these very intimate, quieter moments where you can have. We spend so much time at an officer's dinner for the setup for a bad pun.
It's so good.
And it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Like, I just can't think of any modern movies. There's a lot of talk about, like, Marvel jokes and, like quippiness and, like, Whedonisms and things like that. And what a beautiful example this movie is of, like, taking the time to let a scene breathe. Yeah. I think the last time I saw a movie that just had those moments, that allowed moments to breathe for you to, like, really enjoy the character work being done was Mad Max Fury Road, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Which, listeners, if you haven't seen it, definitely check that one out. It's amazing.
But yeah, you have, and of course, there's the exposition around the table about next steps and what this means and blah, blah, blah. And then Jack gets a look in his eye. And of course, there are two weevils on a plate. And he asks his friend the naturalist, if you had to choose from one of those weevils, which one would you pick? Then goads him into revealing, well, I'd pick the bigger one because, it's obviously the superior of the two. It's bigger, it's blah, blah, blah. Slaps the table with a, ha-ha, I've got you. Don't you know when in the service you should always pick the lesser of two weevils? And it is the most beautifully intoxicated bad joke scene I've ever seen.
I love it so much. I love that scene happens. I love that he's like cutting Stephen down a little bit because literally right before that, everyone is talking all about Lord Nelson and singing his praises, and Stephen is just in the corner rolling his eyes, right?
Yes.
And we go from Stephen rolling his eyes to this.
Because this kind of, like, I've sort of brought this up before when we were talking about the terror, but, like, these are probably all, like, this is the James Fitzjames problem. Yeah. These are all stories some people have heard a million times, right? Like, we have probably heard Jack Aubrey's two stories about Lord Nelson so many times.
Like, and, they were new for the one little kid who was there for the first time,
And Stephen's probably heard them a ton. And also, Stephen's got complicated feelings about authority and like, the lust for king and country and war and the nature of heroes themselves. So, Aubrey, though, is putting his whole heart on the table with this. So, of course, he has to break it with the joke.
And what a beautiful joke.
Such a beautiful joke.
Such a beautiful joke. And the other great thing about this is that this is not the only dinner scene we get in this movie.
No.
They give us multiple dinner scenes. They give us the pudding scene.
And then, but what I love is, like, again, like, for the design of it and the way they interweave the other characters, because it's not just about the officers, right? Mm-hmm. We also see Killick in the galley making these dinners and the way
MVP.
He grumbles. And
I
also
love Killick. If you hadn't mentioned Killick just now, Killick was going to be my one more thing. because I was like, this is actually my favorite character.
No, he's that old sea salt that like he has privileges because he is the steward of the captain. You know, he gets he gets to drink wine on saluting day.
And he gets to say whatever he wants.
He gets to grumble whatever he wants under his breath. And then, you know, we also then see the privileges of you know, the officers they get this, you know, beautiful gelatin pudding of the Galapagos. Well, you know, we see the sort of slop that the guys are eating, especially during the doldrums where they have no wind and there's very little water now. And it's like it's just a gravy and biscuit sludge of some kind. It is absolutely disgusting looking. Mm-hmm. Truly horrendous. And this movie is also really good at I feel like this is one of those movies where it's just like, I feel like I can smell this ship. It's not a pleasant smell, but I can smell it. Like, even, especially when, like, you've got the carpenter down in the hold plugging up the ship with oakum, you know, and trying to keep the water back. And you have that, you know, like 4 feet of water, but it's holding, sir. Mm-hmm. And, like, that water is not going anywhere.
I mean, you can smell that ship because you've been on that ship.
Well, yes, I have been on that ship. I mean, it was a little more ship type but yeah, there's definitely a smell. It's also that sense of the realness of it. They actually sailed it from the East Coast through the Panama Canal. So they filmed those scenes in the Gulf of California, like those wide shots.
Oh.
And then they did recreate a lot of these for inner working, you know, inner views and things, but they kept the realness of it because this wasn't CGI. There was so much practical effect with some CGI for other things, but it's rooted in such reality, and I think that's another huge good point, and why it has such good staying power as well. I mean, it feels so solid and so real, especially like the scene where, you know, getting into when the bad things start to happen, right? When, you know, after we've followed the privateer, the Galapagos, and we've had the tiff between the two, the Maturin and Aubrey. And what a good scene that is, right? Because there's
fantastic.
A storm.
Yeah.
There's that disagreement. There's that feeling of the dread rising. But Maturin's anger, Aubrey shooting back in his face, like these are the requirements of the service. And him yelling the line of you've come to the wrong place for anarchy, brother. Such good character work, such a good scene.
Yeah. But, you know, as you said, like, things get tricky after that, right? They deal with winds, they deal with snow, they deal with the lack of wind, actually, like entire polar opposite. All of the above.
Yeah, and then just like Stephen getting shot because a Marine was like, I'm going to shoot that albatross.
Yeah, that was
Someone
so upsetting. But listen,
actually,
if Stephen was going to get shot for anything, it was being his best, most excited naturalist.
Exactly. And to be fair to the Marine, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner wouldn't be written until 1834. So, I mean, how is he to know that killing an albatross was bad actually?
Bad idea. Leave that verb alone. Just leave it. And then doing the surgery on himself.
Ooh.
Yes. Because Stephen Maturin is a badass. And although it is funny.
I mean, that and Higgins has to look at pictures in a book and have a little liquor before he can even begin to think about approaching this situation. I also would not trust that man. Like, pictures in a book, sir?
Well, I mean, and I also appreciate that he was like, I mean, I'll have to review his notes because he is the doctor. I'm barely a nurse. Like, why are you looking at me? I hand him a knife. Like,
yeah, I know the names of the tools, so I can hand him the tools he needs. That is my job.
And that's it. And I love that, like, I almost imagine him as he's slowly losing consciousness about, like, I'm going to have to do this myself. And then being the only one sort of like in the moment enough to be like, please raise the mirror a little bit. I'm working here.
Well,
Because
also,
the guy holding it like gets distracted and it just lists off to the side.
can I just say, like, there is a element of Book Aubrey here, because Book Aubrey hates when Maltern is covered in blood. He's actually very squeamish about blood for all that for all Jack
his bluster.
Yeah,
I've seen all manner of wounds. Okay, bro.
Don't really like the sight of blood. Not here for it.
And this is why he comes down after everyone's patched up and says, "What's the butcher's bill?" So he doesn't have to see all the blood. I think we're at one more thing.
Yeah, we each pick one more thing that hasn't already been mentioned. Oh,
I mean, a shout out to all like the kids and the midshipmen.
Yeah.
And like, we haven't touched it all on the midshipmen. Mm-hmm. And also like, the Lieutenant Pullings, he's a very important character in the books, and he's played by James D'Arcy. Mm-hmm. So for me now, it's so funny to like Marvel snapped him up too, like a Jarvis over there. But I knew him first as Pullings. You said like, not many people die in this, but that final butcher's bill.
No, you're right.
The bodies laid out is pretty shocking, actually.
Yeah, because it's
there are people. Yeah.
The guy who was on the mast, I know no names. I'm so sorry. But the guy who was on the mast and went overboard, his best friend.
Nagel.
Nagel, the older officer who got shot in the head.
And Nagel is somebody we've had. Look, Nagel is a character I think the movie has great sympathy for, even though he is the character that ends up, because it's a Navy film, you got to have an obligatory flogging. And it's because he is been drinking too much, and he disrespects one of the midshipmen, Holland, and this leads to the crew kind of turning against Holland in a very polite way, like over showing. It's very aggressive how they then salute him afterwards, right?
Yes.
But again, it's we sort of touched on this during the Terror, where in the small wooden world, where this is all you have out here. The threat of mutiny is a real one, and it's a frightening one, and it doesn't take much to make people realize it's all of us versus you,
right?
And so we see that flogging scene, and it's how kind of devastating it is, but still, like, Nagel doesn't try to mutiny. He doesn't. This is the price he pays, and then.
Because he knew what he did, and he knew what the rules were, and so did everyone else, right?
And then in the end, like, Hallam ends up paying the price for it, because Hallam takes his own life. It's just the pressure of being that disliked, even though he's just the poor character who doesn't have authority, even though he's an officer.
Right. He just doesn't have any confidence. I mean, I was literally 2 minutes into the movie. My notes say, Hallam equals officer of the watch, ... and very indecisive. Like, that happens 2.5 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
He's not built, built for the position of authority either, which is unfortunate, because, like, once you get there, it's not easy. Yeah, it's not necessarily easy, quote unquote, to get demoted. And not exactly happy about it,
And right, because, like, thinking back to that GQ article where it's like, there is sort of a description of like, oh, like, wouldn't it be kind of nice to be in a place where everything is so regimented and you know exactly what your place is? And I never felt that way because this is a hard world, and it is a cruel world if you cannot fit. And for many people, it worked. They made it work. They were able to suffer through it, or they even thrived in it. And for other people, it would eat you up and spit you out. And we see that with Hallam. And it's a tragedy because, looking back on this time period, this might have been his only recourse in his family. He might have come from a family where there's no way I'm going to get any land. There's no money. There's no nothing. But I'm being pushed into a Navy position because that's what men are supposed to do to make a name for themselves. They go to war. In a way, it smacks a bit of Franklin. I wonder if Holland would have done better for himself in the Discovery Corps. Was just like, just take these measurements for these, just take these soundings. Like, you don't actually have to.
Less of the wartime. Fewer wartime decisions.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like,
More
I
science.
feel like, I genuinely feel like he just needed to take orders. And I just feel very bad for his, like, position. But it, like, to your point, Nella, my one more thing was sort of an abstract one, which is, like, watching this movie again, realizing how many people were on that boat. And Nella was like, yeah, they packed the boats full because you were going to lose something like a third or maybe even half the men to scurvy. And, like, like, you know, not everybody came back. So they just packed the boats full as much as they could.
Yeah, I mean, especially in this period where, like, we've pretty much figured out scurvy, but scurvy is still a problem. Like, we know we have to eat, like, vegetables and limes, like, right? By this time period. We had like, re-remembered, wait, this is how, but, you know, you're still going along stretches where you're just not going to have access to that kind of stuff. And so we don't really see it in here, in this movie, but
no, but
still,
I remember
sense
like
of how disposable people
I remember
are.
staring at it and just being like, there's so many people on this tiny, tiny ship. So many people.
Yeah.
And like, even when we were watching The Terror, for some reason, I never felt claustrophobic. And I don't know if that was just, you know, part of the genius of them, you know, the cinematographer and everything, of being in this wide open snow space. And I was just like, I mean, the ship can't possibly be that big, so all these people must be cramped in there. But man, did I really feel how many men were on this ship. Like,
I mean, you get that. Because of those wartime scenes where they're all, like, crammed around the cannons and there are 5 different people to operate them, or, you know.
And also, like, the riggings are, you know, they made a big deal of really trying to make the riggings more period appropriate. So it's just an absolute jungle of rope. It feels, you know, what isn't, where a body doesn't go, something important to the ship's handling goes. Yeah. Or even the opening scene where you see all the men crammed up against each other, swinging in their hammocks. There's not any room between the bodies. That's how jam-packed they are in there, you know?
Absolutely.
But, you know, enough people die, and then you start spreading things out a little bit.
I guess. I don't know why my brain went to this, but I just, like, I'm thinking about the chaos of some of those scenes and how crowded and awful they were. But they would still introduce these, like, little moments of brightness. Like, how many times did that little long-haired blonde child just kind of, like, fall over? Like, and and just in the midst of the chaos, someone would always scoop him up.
Yeah.
You know? Always. I think it happens no fewer than 3 times.
You gotta protect the powder monkey, okay? Because that's what that was. That was the powder monkey.
And, you know, like, they're pairing it with, like, no lounging around, you know? But they're scooping him up every time. And that sense of camaraderie on this ship was something that I really enjoyed seeing on screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why it has such a lasting appeal, because for all that happens in the movie, there is a sense of this is a ship full of men, because, you know, there's no women in the movie. But this is a ship full of men who will work and die for each other. And because it's required of them, but also because they do have a great care and esteem for each other, and that the captain has a great care and esteem for them as well.
Yeah. Speaking of another character we didn't talk about a lot, the little blonde kid. Blankeny? What's his name?
Oh, yeah, Lord Blanky.
Blanky? It's not.
Oh, no, sorry. No.
He's got like an extra syllable in there. I know he has an extra syllable in there.
Wait.
But the one who lost his arm pretty early on.
You know, for a while I thought I was going to see Peter Bishop in Amongst the Children, because he was a whole thing in the 90s. And I was like, did they put Jackson in there? Is he in there? Is he one of the children?
Yeah, Blankeny. Like, so it's yeah, but like they pronounce it. They don't quite pronounce it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember how they pronounce it, but I just like I love his role in the movie actually, and how they develop him as a character, especially when he starts out as that character who basically like wants to be a ship's captain himself, right?
Yeah.
Because these are the people he's looked forward to, and then he loses his arm, and there is the reality of the time is he's never going to get to be a ship's captain anymore, right? So, like, what does that mean for him?
Not even, because, like, you know, this is another thing where, you know, you have that moment of Jack checks in on him after his arm has been sort of wrapped up before the amputation, and Stephen, you know, in a very hush whisper, tells him, like, I'm doing everything I can for him, and Jack points out, well, his father knew the life, it's his mother who won't understand.
Right.
You know, these are, you know, this is somebody's child who's, these are people who, he's a lord. This is a person who comes from the privileged class, but this is what you did. Even if they're privileged, well, he'll be an officer at least.
Right.
So we're going to send him on this dangerous ship because that's what you do with your sons.
But then, like, after that happens, he ends up gravitating towards Stephen quite a bit in the show. We have that.
I'm telling you, there is a fic where he grows up and he joins the Discovery Corps. Like, hands
right.
down.
No, that's exactly who he is supposed to be, you know? I love the naturalist montage.
Yeah.
The naturalist montage is fantastic.
It's so good. And I always love that little bit where they're having that quiet conversation where they're talking about evolution before, you know, this is before Darwin. And so simply does Stephen just say, yes, like they do change, but does God make them change? Now that's a question. And I just love that. I just love that scene so much.
Me too. Yeah, I like the two of them together. I think they have a great relationship. I love the schmaltz, as you all know, so I love when he noticed that Stephen was so sad about not getting to go to the Galapagos, and so he gave him that little beetle.
Like, oh. I love that he wants to be a fighting naturalist.
A fighting naturalist, yes.
Perhaps I could be a fighting naturalist.
Stephen's a pretty handy swordsman, as we find out later.
You know what we didn't touch on? The phasmid. All right, how we even get the French? I guess that's where my one more thing, because I love that it all comes back to naturalism, and they just like a walking stick insect. Jack gets the idea to disguise the ship as a whaling ship, and I just love the setup for that because they all put on, you know, some oil overcoats and, you know, hats off everyone, like
scarves,
burns of oakum,
and no sirs, yes sir.
We're rendering fat, right?
That's still one of my favorite jokes all the time, every day. Don't repeat everything I say. I won't repeat everything you say. Did you repeat that because I said it? No.
No, I did not repeat that because you said it.
Yeah, and I love that, you know, and of course there's the thrilling speech of, it's such a good speech at the end too. And although this be but the far side of the world, the ship is England, and et cetera, et cetera. And then they, you know, I love that they take the ship. I love how they take the ship. Of course, there is, you know, the mourning of those who die in battle. And then the reveal at the end being, okay, remember how... Twist! So this whole time, they've been chasing the ship, and there has been this sort of... And this is another reason why I think this just didn't track well in 2003, because, again, we wanted revenge stories. We wanted America... Swear jar! Yeah, stories. And while we have this Phantom, this French privateer that is a mirror image of our ship, and it is zigging wherever we zag, and like we are constantly just at its tail, and every time it thinks it has us, we escape, and every time we think it has it, or we think we have it, like something happens to us. And there is that discussion of Jack quietly just saying, why is he so obsessed with me? Like, did I kill a family member? Like, a son, God forbid? And Stephen just says, he fights like you, Jack. And when the ship is taken and he looks for the captain for the exchange of the sword and for the surrender, it is claimed that the captain died, and he sees a body in the ship, and the surgeon gives him the sword. But Spy Stephen, however, offhandedly later remarks when Pullens is given the Acheron to take back into port as its captain, and with his orders, Stephen notes that, it's all those wounded, and there's no surgeon aboard. He died of a fever months ago. And Jack is very affronted.
Wait
I love how affronted
minute.
Jack is. Their surgeon gave me this sword. And then he turns the ship around, beats to arms, and Stephen still goes without his flightless cormorant that he saw in Galapagos, but has not been able to get his hands on yet.
It's a flightless bird.
And as Jack says, the bird is flightless, yes? It's not going anywhere. And that's how the movie ends.
And then they play their merry little plucky tune, and off they go.
Although I also...
making beautiful music with each other as they chase the Acheron
after
again.
watching it sort of again and understanding that twist at the end, because I genuinely think I missed it the first time I watched it, because I feel like it was all just too jumbled. I think my brain was like, but you already have the prize. Don't you already have the prize? Don't you already have the surrender?
Hold on.
But it still needs to get to port so it can go to the prize office. So if the captain is on board and he manages to overpower, they had to split the crew.
That's fair.
That's
fair.
So Pullens doesn't have a full crew, and he has a ship full of, French captives. Mm-hmm. So if somebody gets out, they have their captain. It's not a good situation for Pullens.
That's fair.
Anyway, I guess that's my one more thing.
Yeah.
Oh, my one more thing is, one of my favorite things is that Taika Waititi, in his Our Flag Means Death press run, was asked what his favorite movies are, and he mentioned Master and Commander as his favorite romance.
I'll bet he did.
I love that.
And I'm like, see? He gets it. He gets it. But that's why he has the queer pirate show right now. Anyway.
I love that. I think it's a good stopping point, right?
We did it.
My very favorite... this is it. This is my very favorite romantic movie. Master and Commander.
Master and Commander.
The end.
The far side of the world.
At the far side of the world.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, dear listeners, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, what is your favorite Malafor? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/clockpod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
I am realizing that I completely dropped the ball and did not set up why we're asking about Malifaux. So really quickly.
We said weevils.
Well, weevils that's a pun. That's not a Malifaux. So
No, 'cause
Malifaux,
it's lesser of two, I guess. Yeah.
yes, it's a pun on a saying. So Malifaux are when you sort of mush two idioms and you make them kiss, and then you sort of mix them up. And Jack in the books is very kind of infamous for this. In fact, him and Stephen, it starts becoming a running joke for them. One of the ones I can think of off the top of my head that Jack says is make hay while the iron is hot. So my favorite personal Malifaux is we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. That's my favorite. So
that is a fantastic Malifaux. I don't have. I today learned what a Malifaux was. So
yes,
I would need to go through a list of them to see which one my favorite is.
Yeah. And personally, I've had people claim that we'll burn that bridge when we get to it doesn't make sense. And I'm just like,
yes, it does.
How could it not make sense? It makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. I did actually look up a list, and I'm just going to choose one. I'm going to choose one that I like.
Ooh, I love that.
Oh, no. Can I choose two?
You can choose
I'm going
two
to choose
because
two.
I'm not going to be able to
One
pick
of them is the apple doesn't fall far from the scene of the crime, which I think is pretty good. And the other one is if it
pretty
looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, wear it. Which I think is pretty funny.
That's a pretty good one.